World Covid-19 mortality, 4th of July. How bad was it out there? It's easy to get fixated on our own countries. It is instructive to see just how bad it was for other nations. Or was it? Note to censors, we use only government data. If you have a problem with the results, speak to the government. With 136 countries to show you, we're definitely not going to go one by one. If you'd like a tour, there is the World Tour video, which is not narrated, but has the regular charts for each reporting country, 214 of them. We've restricted the charts here to populations over 1 million and cases over 1,000, with a few sneaking in a fraction below that. I like their curves. The point being, we want real contagions, not never touched us. We're trying to be fair, after all. We're going to be putting a lot of charts on one page, and there's only one thing I'd like you to look for, and I'll be looking myself, for that black mortality indicator to get over 20%. That's saying that on that particular day, the reported COVID deaths represented more than a fifth of a normal day. A fifth of a normal deaths for a day, or a month even, isn't even close to being a material threat to society, but look how few of these countries will get close even to that. Most, like Algeria here, will barely register. No surprise then to see which countries do manage to experience a devastating, or not devastating, but relatively massive hit by reported deaths. Yup, Belgium here goes over 20% with ease, the black peak reaching 100%, and as an aside, notice the dotted line, that's overall mortality. Normally you won't even notice the overall mortality. It'll be flatlined at the bottom of the chart. But for the usual suspects, amazing reported deaths become a significant factor in the country's mortality. Overall mortality is assumed standard 9 per thousand mortality, typical for a Western nation, since the first COVID death was reported. How many deaths is that, and how much is COVID-19 as a proportion of that? In other words, this whole exercise is a chance to look at the world out there and just ram home the recognition that the rest of the world is somehow experiencing a passing irritant, whereas we in the West, in the UK, US and EU core nations in particular, are somehow besieged by government, locked down because of a massively aggressive virus that the rest of the world just isn't experiencing. Now, are they backward, stupid, lying or irresponsible? Or are we backward and our politicians lying? You choose. So Belgium goes on our list as clearly breaking 20%. If something just touches, we may give it a pass, looking for clear and significant breaks over 20%. Most won't even show up, but just be flatlined at the bottom. We'll scan 6 at a time like this. They're small, but 136 countries is a lot of slides otherwise. Africa first, and that's Algeria, Angola, Benin, Burkina Faso, Cameroon, Central African Republic, all flat. To see them full size, check out the World Tour, so you know I'm not bamboozling you. Here's Chad, Congo, Congo Democratic Republic, Djibouti, Equatorial Guinea, and Eswatini, Swaziland. Djibouti has something, but it's under 20%, and look at the overall mortality, minuscule. Everyone else was flat. Get used to that, and then ask why, and why we aren't. All of these countries are over 1 million population and over 1,000 cases, or near enough. It only takes one infected to start a contagion. 1,000 should be plenty, and yet, where are the deaths? Remember, we live in free nations and go to war to export democracy and with the best healthcare in the world. Surely we could expect a pass like the rest of the world. Apparently not. Here's Ethiopia, Gabon, Ghana, Guinea, Guinea-Bissau, Kenya, all flat. Liberia, Libya, Madagascar, Malawi, Mali, Mauritania, all flat. Poor, impoverished, I was thinking poor as sympathy, African nations totally escaping the virus deaths despite over 1,000 cases. Maybe we need a Western Lives Matter campaign, because it seems our politicians are playing fast and loose with them. Morocco, Mozambique, Nigeria, Rwanda, Senegal, yup, flat. Sierra Leone, Somalia, South Africa, South Sudan, Tunisia, Uganda, flat. Zambia completes Africa and it's on to the Americas. Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, Canada and Chile. So Zambia flat and Africa disease central as an impoverished continent with AIDS, Ebola, typhoid, the works, and it had the cases, all of these countries had over 1,000 cases, plenty to get a real contagion going, and it only had one that was even off the floor. It had the virus, but not the deaths. Funny that. The Americas, however, and South America is the only non-agenda, non-Western continent to have a real virus issue, it seems. Bolivia still climbing and breaking through 20%, overall mortality 3.4%, barely worth a mention as a main cause of death. Brazil looks like it's at peak and repeatedly getting a little over 20% daily mortality, overall at 8.3%, a footnote amidst normal mortality. Canada, friend to Agenda HQ, just touching 20% mortality and overall 6.2%, another footnote rather than existential threat. No doubt lockdown saved them. Didn't work in the UK. Chile, over peak I'm glad to say, because they had some serious spikes even to 100%, but mainly 50%, overall though 9.2%, of interest for a short while, but that's it. Colombia, Costa Rica, Cuba, Dominican Republic, Ecuador and El Salvador. Ecuador, massive spikes reaching to 100%, but it also has a habit of missing days and presumably playing catch-up. Overall mortality at 7.5%, of interest for a short while, but that's it. Guatemala, Honduras, Mexico, Nicaragua, Panama and Paraguay. Mexico still climbing, or maybe just at peak, looks like peak with daily mortality coming down. Clearly through 20%, overall mortality 6.5%, of interest for a short while. Panama, almost touching, just touching in fact at 21% on a spike, overall mortality 4.2%, still climbing, so a footnote at present, but we'll include it. Peru, Puerto Rico, Uruguay, USA, Venezuela, and starting Europe, Albania. Peru at peak, just brushing through 20%, overall mortality 8.8%, a short-lived note in the deaths of Peruvians. Puerto Rico, and very sporadic data with 1.5% overall mortality, so I think we'll put those spikes down to finally getting around to reporting rather than reflecting reality. Oh gee, Agenda Central, how strange to see you here, and with the implied death rates lagged 14 days, up over 50%, a virus that ceases to decline at peak and goes sideways. And oh yes, deaths peak at the same time as cases. No need to wait for deaths when you can just report them and have done with it. And this is the USA diluted by actually responsible states. I really ought to do a special on New York, 500 times harder hit than the Far East, outranking EU HQ Brussels even. So yes, hardly a surprise that we see it solidly over 20%. Frankly, the US also had a haphazard reporting regime, so I'll ignore the 80% spike, but sure, you're in. And Albania, bottom right, starts Europe off on a good note, flat. Europe proper and Armenia, Austria, Azerbaijan, Belarus, Belgium and Bosnia, and hello Belgium. I mean, by now, with all the charts you've seen with mortality flatlined at the bottom, this should provoke a smile, right? Even a laugh maybe. I mean, EU HQ Central. And mortality races up to 100%, you're dead within a day of getting to hospital, implied death rate lag 14 of 85%, and the worst hit nation on the planet at 34 death days, 23% overall mortality. I mean, they tried, they really tried. Let's clap for Brussels. But hey, so there's a 23% boost for a couple of months. We should end democracy for that? I don't think so. And sure, lockdown apologists, knock yourself out. We've already shown that UK lockdown had zero effect by two key measures, and if you want fraud, wait for that UK chart. But hey, not to take away from Belgium's moment of glory. Congratulations, world number one, even beating the USA, but not getting close to New York, sorry. And yes, you're in. Bulgaria, Croatia, Cyprus, Czechia, Denmark and Estonia. A couple twitch, but no, nobody over 20%. Finland, France, Georgia, Germany, Greece and Hungary, and a spike from Finland, but bonjour Paris. Finland, overall mortality 1.7%. They had a bad hair day one day, it looks like. Not really the sort of egregious villain or terribly sad victim we're looking for. We'll give it a pass. Whereas France, co-ruler of the EU, implied death rate lag 14 of 80%, sixth worst hit nation in the world. Last time, that was the June 24th update, haven't done the rankings for 4th of July. Tight 4-day lag in cases to deaths, bit of a rush to die in France it seems. Overall mortality 10.3%. Not Belgium, but not flatlined like most countries either. Basically, hardly a surprise. You're looking at one of the key agenda players. But hey, we weren't making accusations, just noting unusually high mortality. Interesting to note that Germany, that other ruler of the EU, arguably number one, still either has enough respect for its people or just for alles in Ordnung that it chooses not to show absurd numbers. And for an agenda country, as it ought to be, it and Denmark are next to each other, way down in the 20s in world rankings, leaving the likes of France, UK and Spain to carry the burden. Ireland, Italy, Kazakhstan, Kosovo, how on earth do you say that? Kyrgyzstan and Latvia. Any guesses who the bad boys are? It's disarmingly simple, isn't it? Want to know who the worst hit nations in the world are? Are they G7, EU core, Western power centres or such? Then sure. And the world's intelligentsia, media, financiers, nobody notices. Funny that. I guess when you're properly briefed, you're blind. So sure, Ireland with a solid whack over 20% and a spike to 100%. Overall mortality 9.5%, hardly a threat to society, but a high number versus the rest of the world. Your name too shall go on the list. Who else? Oh yeah, Italy, backwater nation, not the HQ of the World Church, no power or significance to Italy at all. Sorry, Catholic Church. Tight lag, 3 days, you die pretty quick in Italy. Implied death rate, lag 14, 159%, so you can die from Covid-19 even when you're not a Covid-19 case. A neat trick. And ranked number 4 in the world. Yeah, that mortality indicator kind of points the finger at the players. Rest of the world flatlined, roadkill, zip, except for South America, a bit bizarre. But agenda nations, wow, look at those massive deaths. The funny thing is, even at 10% to 20% of normal mortality for a few months, it's like, why is there a crisis? Because we want one. Yep. Lithuania, Moldova, Netherlands, North Macedonia, Norway and Poland. Moldova, not a place I'm familiar with. Past peak, definitely twitched to 20% overall mortality. Overall mortality 6.3%. Hardly society threatening, nor an obvious agenda candidate, but we'll note it. Not the kind of high you want from the Netherlands, but interestingly, 75% implied death rate, lag 14, despite a healthy 8-day separation. Maybe not as clean as it looks. Overall mortality is high compared to the rest of the world at 9.3%. Daily mortality definitely heading into the 30s, spiking to 50, and a drawn-out trail with growth decline sideways at peak. But then you are looking at number 8 in the world, behind the USA at number 7. That's 24th of June data. And Netherlands is not far from Brussels, as I recall. North Macedonia climbing, definitely hitting 20%. Overall mortality 4.8%. Hardly a big deal, but yes, that's a 20. Portugal, Romania, Russia, Serbia, Slovakia, Slovenia. Nothing to see here, folks. Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, Tajikistan, Turkey and the UK, and a glut of mortality except for 2. No prizes for guessing. Spain, home to a vicious lockdown and mortality solidly up to 80%, overall mortality 16%, no cases to death lag, implied death rate 322%. Yep, 3 times as many die as had COVID. Hardly surprising to find Spain in the number 3 slot with so much skullduggery, and flagged by a simple check on mortality. But does anyone notice? And who's at number 2? Sweden, ahead of the world with great curl over great numbers till the world noticed that it didn't lock down, and so the punishment regime began. And no, this isn't number 2. The only country with a right to look normal, and it is the most abnormal chart of all the countries. At peak, the virus auto-detected peak and went sideways. Or if not the virus, who did? Case death lag totally messed up as cases are even rising months later, while deaths sag slowly to a reasonable level. Overall mortality 14.6%, high, but still has the top 4 criminals above it. No doubt they'll keep pushing until Sweden finally gets the coveted number 1 slot and fingers can be pointed, and no one will wonder why it took so long for it to get there. Even oh so clean and responsible Switzerland manages to get a solid over 20%, though with overall mortality at 5.1%, implied death rate 43%, and ranked 15th in the world. Switzerland and Canada actually managed to have some South American countries ahead of them in the world rankings, which from number 1 to number 9 are all Western agenda, and then there's New York. But the king of the agenda, or queen perhaps, here we are, the UK, number 2 in world rankings, behind EU HQ Brussels, and the most flagrantly fraudulent chart of them all. Sweden is a burning punishment. The UK is gloating abuse, or should that be smirking abuse? At peak, the virus goes sideways. And since when do viruses detect peak, or have CNN? Couldn't wait for cases, so cases death lag is nil, and implied death rate lag 14 is 202%. Twice as many died as had COVID. Oops! And look at the glorious black Eiger, death not in the Alps. A solid 60%, and then that marvellous oscillating spiky decline, an indicator of a pseudo-random number generator getting caught out. Even if you had not watched any other YouTube video nor heard of death stuffing or whistleblowers or empty hospitals, this chart would tell you they lied, and lied. Except about one thing. They are one of 3 countries that simultaneously, within a day or so, announced no normal till the vaccine. Gates, Trudeau and the UK government. We heard, thank you. Ukraine, Uzbekistan, Australia, China, Haiti and Indonesia, a couple more Europe than the Far East, and spot the geography fail. Sorry Haiti, but the first 2 are flat to complete Europe, and 4 flat to start the Far East, with an honorary flat Far Easterner in Haiti. Oh well. Does it really get any simpler than that? Move away from the West and the deaths miraculously disappear. And does anyone notice? Japan, Korea, Republic of, Malaysia, Nepal, New Zealand, Philippines, OG, all flat. Singapore, Sri Lanka, Thailand, Afghanistan, Bahrain, Bangladesh, a flat earth Far East, and now the Mediterranean or Near East. Egypt, India, Iran, Iraq, Israel, Jordan. Nothing to see here, folks. Kuwait, Lebanon, Oman, Pakistan, Palestine, Qatar. Flat as the desert, if deserts are flat-ish. Saudi Arabia, Sudan, UAE and Yemen. Flat. 136 countries, most flat with mortality barely visible. And the other 80 countries either had fewer than 1,000 cases or fewer than 1 million population, so you've seen the worst that the virus can offer, and for most of the world it was a brush-off issue. That doesn't mean the politicians haven't played games, but they had little excuse for doing so. And the simple observation is, whether it was the cleverness of the politicians, or it was the true nature of the virus, more likely, that is an entire world brushing off Covid-19 with ease. Compare and contrast that with the exceptions, those that actually had daily deaths exceeding 20% of normal mortality. We had, for reasons that elude me, an apparently real problem in South America: Bolivia, Brazil, Chile, Ecuador, Mexico, Panama and Peru. Fair enough. And we had 2 candidates in Europe, that notably reached 20% in daily mortality, Moldova and North Macedonia. Curious, but okay. And then for the truly outstanding levels of daily mortality, we had to look not to impoverished Africa, but to the power centres of the West, the elite, the richest nations, and critically, the centres of political power. Belgium and EU core members France, Italy, Netherlands, Spain and Ireland. The UK, the USA and Canada, and Sweden under sentence of death by Covid until the case against lockdown is proven. It won't be a surprise to see which countries top the charts in Covid deaths per 100 million people, and how badly they fare against Southeast Asia and the Far East, the latter comprising literally half the population of the planet, updated with 4th of July data. Nobody notices that the richest countries on the planet, the most powerful, the ones with the most sophisticated healthcare, the ones with the scientific and pharmaceutical powerhouses, are also the hardest hit by an absurd factor. You'd think with all that scientific and pharmaceutical skill would be a shoo-in to be safe, but the government says we won't be safe, not until the vaccine. I'm Andrew Mather, a 60-year-old Brit, mathematician, financier, technologist, husband, biker, pilot, healer, whatever. Feel free to get in touch, andrew@peerlessreads.com or andrew@amather.com. Either should get to me.